Hi, I'm Karen Friedman Agnifilo, co-host of MissTrial, the podcast with my two friends and colleagues and all former prosecutors, Danya Perry, Kathleen Rice, and I, who will dissect for you everything law and politics and whatever else is going on in the world at the time that is in our expertise and our wheelhouse, which is all things law. This is MissTrial After Dark. This is a clip from our this week's episode of MissTrial, where we talk about Jack Smith's huge 160-something page filing, where he sets forth essentially what the facts are, the fact-bound analysis and the law for the judge, so she can make the determination that the United States Supreme Court insisted that is made. And that is exactly what he did. He put all the facts down, he put the law down, he applied the law to the facts, and told why it is that this new superseding indictment meets the requirements of the presidential immunity decision that came down July 1st by the Supreme Court. So listen to our take on what was in there, and please watch MissTrial every Thursday. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Danya, also, didn't Judge Chutkan have some pretty, harsh words for the arguments that Trump's lawyers did make as to the redactions? She basically said every single argument you're making, they made 3 points. They're all political. Not one contained an actual legal argument. So if you can just talk about that.
Fighting to keep this case as a legal criminal matter like every other one. So she has said, I'm not moved by the election calendar. That's not my problem. I am just running this case as any judge would. This is not DOJ now setting the timetable. It's a judge who is following the exact cadence, rhythm, pattern, and timing of every other criminal case. In any case, this would have, you can't say any case because nothing would have gone up to the Supreme Court, gotten this new ruling back. But it's if she had been mandamus, right, which is a higher court telling her she needs to do a factual determination, this is what she would do in any case in the same time frame, right? So that's she take them to task because she's like, I don't care about your campaign events or about your election schedule. I care about the docket of this court and keeping this case moving as best I can.
Absolutely. Danya, can you get into I perused, I did not read every single word, but there were some pretty good nuggets in there. And let me just say that there was a recent interview with a Democratic pollster by the name of Celinda Lake. And she said that she was polling independent voters who identified as independent. And she asked about the Jan 6 case. And they said, what was that? What's that about? It's unfathomable to me. It's not so much unfathomable that people don't understand every single legal case that Trump is facing because there is such a plethora of them. But Jan 6, so I don't know. I just throw that out there because, he's crying about this is too close to the election. And there's recent, focus groups showing that a lot of voters have put January 6th in the rearview mirror, even though I think one of the better points that Tim Walz made during the debate with J.D. Vance was asking J.D. Vance if he was going to, if Trump lost. And he said, I just, Tim, I want to look towards the future. He didn't want to answer the question because he couldn't. But he went back to something in the past, right? Exactly. But here's the problem. This is the real he said he went into how horrible it was that Harris is trying to, censor people on Facebook. I'm like, what? Apples and oranges. What is it? It was just a ridiculous non-answer. And that's exactly what Tim Walz called it, a damning non-answer. But anyway, I digress. But I just brought that up because there are so many unbelievable facts because the Supreme Court kind of characterized they put things into 3 categories, conversations or acts into 3 categories. So if you could go through those just to remind our viewers exactly what the Supreme Court said and how Jack Smith, I thought, did such a masterful job of really cutting out all the stuff that was inarguably or could have been argued was official and really just kept it down to the fundamental, factual conversations that in no way could be defined as conversations in his official capacity as president.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, so yeah, just to tell before we dive into the facts, I do think we should remind people of what the standard is that they set forth. And so, and so if you want, I'll just take a crack at it really quick. It's essentially the Supreme Court sent it back down and created this thing. There's core presidential responsibilities, right? Things in the Constitution, things that can neither be like Congress can't change that law, can't legislate that they do something, and you can't stop him from doing, and so you can't prosecute him from doing. So those were core presidential duties, and they said things like dealing with your own DOJ. Then there was, on the other side, was unofficial private acts, right? Those are immune. You are not immune from prosecution for those. But then there were, in the middle, official acts. However, the government can rebut the presumption that those official acts were that you'd be immune from it. And in here, Jack Smith actually talked about what the legal standard is for rebutting the presumption. And it has to do with, and I'll find the exact language, but it has to do with will it interfere with him doing his job? Will it interfere with the executive branch? Will it chill him in any way? Will it cause him to look over his shoulder, kind of thing? Is it sort of, and there's like a test in there. And again, I'll find the exact language. And so really what this is about is making that determination of what is, because Jack Smith then superseded the indictment, took out all the core things that the Supreme Court said they were immune, and only left in things that were either private, like when he was a candidate, or things that were official, but he could rebut the presumption. And in this document, there's 4 parts of this document. And the first is, these are the facts. The second is, this is the law. The third is, this is how when I apply the facts to the law. And the fourth was like a conclusion. And essentially what he asked the court to do was, please rule that the following facts are either they're unofficial or they're official, but you rebutted the presumption. And he even said, can you talk about it in the alternative? So that way, if the Supreme Court disagrees, so in other words, he'd say, I think this is unofficial. Judge, please tell me if you think this is unofficial. And if the judge rules it's unofficial, fine, but also rule alternatively. If, however, it was not unofficial, then therefore I find that the presumption was rebutted because of the following reasons. And Jack Smith asks for that in this document, in this motion, so that it won't go up and down to the Supreme Court multiple times. So it'll be like everything is going to be ruled on this or that. And so that's what the document is about. And I want to dive in on these just incredible facts and some shocking things. Okay, we're back, and I can't wait to dive into this document. But again, please support our sponsors. They're wonderful, and we couldn't keep the lights on without them. Also, please support us by subscribing to the new Legal AF YouTube channel. It's at Legal AF MTN, which stands for Midas Touch Network. And there you're going to see a lot of content that is curated by my co-host on Legal AF, Michael Popak, who did a hot take with Kathleen and is going to start doing them with Danya and me. And, we're putting out as much as we can. There's so much to talk about that there's just not enough airwaves. So this new channel is going to be a great place to find that information. And we're going to be talking about all things that we talk about here, and do it in real time as much as we can and put it all out there, because we only have 35 days left before, or 33 days left before the election. And we got to get as much information out there as possible so people can we have to vote, right? We absolutely have to get as many voters out there as possible. And, frankly, if we lose, but we lose fairly, then we should shake hands and support Donald Trump, who's the next president potentially, because that's what should happen. We shouldn't tear down our society the way he's trying to tear it down. But I don't want him to win. So everybody go out and vote, vote the right way. So let's dive into this document, this brief that was filed by Jack Smith with the incredible, shocking allegations, and just the reminder. My God, the problem with time is time can make things less shocking, right? You sort of forget, and you forget how serious it was. You forget how bad it was. Also, you have Trump and all his validators going out there, calling the insurrectionists patriots, and really kind of, in some ways, neutralizing and taking the sting out of how bad that all of those efforts were, and that Jan 6, it wasn't just January 6, just how the lengths with which he went to try to steal the election. And this document was incredible. Like, it reminded us of how bad it was. I mean, I was just
even worse. It's even worse than you thought, even worse. And the reason is because, different from the Jan 6 committee, Jack Smith had access to everyone, the complete Trump inner circle, not just on the campaign, but in the administration as well. So on that, Danya, if you want to just start talking about some of the bombshells, I would call them.
Yeah, we heard. Well, just the overlay here is, for me, at least personally, I love the style of the draftsmanship here. It is just, there's nothing flowery or over the top. It is just like very plain spoken and very punchy and to the point. So, you get lines like this one. When the defendant lost the 2020 presidential election, he resorted to crimes to try and stay in office. That's a, pretty punchy recitation, of the theory of the case here. Yeah, the Jack Smith run. So there was a lot, right? Like, thanks to the unbelievable work of the Jan 6 committee, and, a lot of insiders who were so disgusted by the events of that day and leading up to it, and after that, they have come forward, and, great journalism. We think we know a lot about what happened. And I think we do know the general rubric, like what, kind of all of these baseless cases that were filed, as you pointed out earlier, Kathleen, all of them were, the courts worked and they were all dismissed, right? Or found to have no factual basis. Lots of lawyers were actually faced disciplinary action as a result of filing frivolous lawsuits. And then, Trump moved on to other iterations to try and figure out how he was going to stay in power. And that kind of got us to January 6th. So we knew the overall themes here. But I think what this does, as Karen said earlier, it gives us a lot more detail, right? It gives us the inside scoop and the on the ground view, right, of what happened in real time. And as Kathleen, as you pointed out, a lot of this stuff wasn't available to the January 6th committee because there were claims of executive privilege and other immunity. Here, all those folks, not all of them famously, but, spoke with Jack Smith and testified in the grand jury. And so we get a lot of the actual conversations and communications that happen in real time, including, a theme here, and there are a couple you guys might want to tease out too, but that Trump knew that that the court cases were bogus and that, in fact, he had lost the election. He knew it because he was saying as much to other people around him, and other people, trusted advisors, we're all saying the same thing, right? With a couple of notable exceptions who have, of folks who have since been indicted or disciplined. And so that comes out, in detail, kind of the threats to Mike Pence, telling him that people were going to, quote, hate his guts and think he's stupid, and telling him, quote, this one really got me, you're too honest, right? When Mike Pence protested that he didn't approve of the interference. And you get a lot of details like that, right? Of like intimate moments where the defendant, as Jack Smith calls him, would have these candid conversations with his family members and advisors, where he said, the one to Ivanka and Jared Kushner, he says, does anyone have a right here? But it's basically, whether you win or lose, you fight like hell. Like,
Exactly.
no, that's actually not how elections work. The way they work is peaceful transition of power. Not if you know you lost, you fight like hell. So a couple of those nuggets in there that kind of fly off the page that make you say, like, okay, we now see this is a trial brief. This is the statement of the case in a lot of detail. We see, they're all redacted, but there are, dozens potentially of witnesses. They may not choose to call them all for, efficiency reasons, but who will be testifying. And we see some of the words that are going to come out of their mouths. So that's kind of the new stuff, but basically I thought Jack Smith and his team did an amazing job of responding to I'll say the threat, but the mandate from the Supreme Court, which is, everything here was unofficial and therefore not immune because Trump was acting as a candidate. And they show this in exquisite detail.
Over and over again. You're right, Danya.
Yeah, it's like a hammer. And there's the last piece, and then I'd love to hear what you think. Very specifically, the Supreme Court said that they believed that or held conversations with Pence might, entitled to a presumption of immunity, like is that an official act or not? And I think he made a really good point saying, no, those conversations and the pressure campaign against Pence was really just related to Pence's ministerial role presiding over the Senate, and that the actions that Trump took are not like the executive branch has nothing to do really with an election, right? There's nothing in the Constitution or anywhere else that says you get to have anything to do, president or vice president, with an election other than just actually taking in the vote. So I thought they did a really good job in saying that, look, there's no role for the executive in choosing the next president. That's part of the way we know he's acting as candidate. But I don't know what else jumped out at you guys.
Well, I know that you make a really good point because they specifically said that the executive branch can play no role in choosing who the next president or vice president is. And he was trying to convince Mike Pence, his running mate.
What I loved about that is, we know that the Supreme Court is obsessed with old timey, history. And if it didn't exist at the time when the Constitution was written, it doesn't matter. So much of this document, when he's making the legal argument about the fact that the executive plays no role in an election, cites the Federalist Papers and Ben Franklin and the Constitution, and even quoting at one point it said in there that the president or the executive branch, the president has no role in choosing the next president, and choosing is CHUSING, because that's how it was spelled in, the Federalist paper that they cited when, from back then. Like, it was so clearly written for this Supreme Court, right? And I thought that was really, really smart way to kind of do that.
So this jumped out at me. I don't know why, but it's one of those things that is irrefutable and really makes it clear the distinction between an official act and a private unofficial one. Just take Trump showing up at the Ellipse. Okay. They had the bulletproof glass, Secret Service was protecting him, but that whole event was paid for by private money. Okay. The whole event, it was not paid. It was not an official government thing, to the extent that Jack Smith goes to say, when he walked out, Trump walked out on the stage, they didn't play Hail to the Chief. They played YMCA and Lee Greenwood's, God bless him, the USA. I mean, now that might seem like a little picayune kind of thing, but if you, the regular person, right, like all of us are, if you want to understand the difference between an official act, everyone knows the song, da, 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 da. That was not being played on the ellipse. It was a political rally. The other thing about Mike Pence that I really just thought was so outrageous, having been in that building at the time on that day.
Just that it's there time and time again over the course of this, 165 page brief, those little details, are peppered in right throughout. And they're so important because this is a new test, right? And so how can you figure out which side of the line something? So they just larded up with all these details, like, Pence made a comment to Trump, like, I'm talking to you as a friend, or they're having a quote unquote private lunch.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
or,
a good one.
For one of the meetings with Pence, and Pence staffers, there was no one from the White House counsel's office there, just private lawyers. And in fact, White House counsel was specifically disinvited. So what could be a bad?
I'm so glad you just mentioned that, Danya, because that was one of the ones that jumped out at me too, Danya, where they totally excused the White House counsel who represents the president, not the candidate, from the Oval and kept, what was it, Rudy or some other hat, private attorney hat, whatever. Yeah.
Rudy, Sidney Powell, Team Crazy. No, you're right. That's absolutely things like that were, I think, fantastic. How they really pointed out how there was even his Trump's speech. There was a speech that he gave on January 4th in, I can't remember where it was, but then there was also the Jan 6th speech, and they were showing how, and the one that they gave, I think it was in Michigan, and the speech that was given in Michigan on January 4th was clearly personal. Like, it was marked personal on his calendar, and he came down to help it was like a runoff. And so he came down to help the senators, and they established beyond a reasonable doubt that particular speech was personal. And the reason that was important is so much of the language in that speech was, again, the language that he gave on the ellipse. And I thought that was interesting how they used that to show that the speech on the ellipse that got the people riled up to go and storm the Capitol, that was to show that was private and campaign related and not presidential. They just were so meticulous at really parsing through what was official and what was unofficial. And what struck me was sort of interesting there was the Twitter account, the tweets that they were saying how, look, he used that Twitter account since 2009 or whatever it was, like way back when, right? He's been using that personal for a long time, and he uses it personal now, same account, right? But in the middle, when he was president, he sometimes used it for official and sometimes unofficial. And they cited to a court case that shows that when that is the case, you have to go tweet by tweet and figure out which one's official and which one's unofficial, and which one's business related and which one's not. And so they were saying, it was very interesting because Jack Smith was like, although the things that he was tweeting on January 6th were clearly unofficial, and it was going on and on and on. He's like, there were two that might be official. So they're basically essentially saying to Chutkan, so if you want to throw those out, you can, because those might be official. When he ultimately 2 hours later said, hey, be peaceful, go home, and when he basically told everyone to stop rioting, he finally stepped in after people were begging him to. And they were saying, look, he has police powers. He has to, public safety is obviously very important. That might be official. So if you want, we don't have to use those, which I thought was sort of interesting because, of course, as a prosecutor, what do you care that he finally did the right thing? That doesn't really help you. Thank you so much for tuning in to After Dark MissTrial on the new Midas Touch YouTube channel. It's the Legal AF MTN, Midas Touch Network, YouTube channel that my co-host on Legal AF, Michael Popak, is curating. And he's going to be putting lots of content on here. And we will provide as much content as we can from both Legal AF and MissTrial. And we look forward to seeing you as much as possible, especially before the election, because everybody has to go out and vote. And we want to give you as much information as we possibly can so that you have all the information you need to vote this November.